Hey all, it's getting very late in the season now because all the good boats that were ready to go to the Caribbean have already been scooped up, and all the boats north of the Chesapeake are fixing to get hauled out for the winter. But every once in a while, a gem pops up, one of those hidden ones. This week on Everything You Need to Know, should you buy a boat that's fresh back from the Bahamas? I help a lot of people with the boat buying process, and sometimes we find these hidden gems that the owner's already outfitted for cruising with things like solar panels and batteries and big anchors, and they show up for sale after those owners did what they set out to do: go cruising. And on the surface, it seems nice. Someone already figured out all the stuff that needed doing, so you won't have to. But is that the whole story? What's the downside to buying one of these boats? This gem popped up recently, and the listing specifically says we weren't allowed to see it until May the 8th of this year, which seems oddly specific, but that happens to be right before hurricane season, so this boat was likely cruising in the Bahamas or the Caribbean until then, and the pictures kind of tell that story too. What we're looking at here is Zola, a Beneteau 393 from 2006. And if she was insured during her trip, she would have had a deadline to get back to the US by July. So it's obvious why we couldn't see her until May. As a boat, the 393 is an excellent cruiser. She's in that sweet spot for a couple to be able to handle her at sea, 38 to 42 feet usually. But she's plenty heavy at 17,000 pounds, which is more than you need for Caribbean cruising. So these tend to be very comfortable and well-mannered boats in most of the weather that you're gonna run into down there. These also have the winged keel, so at just 5 feet deep, you'll easily be able to get into all the cool anchorages in Florida and the Bahamas, which is a pretty big win for a 40-foot boat. The 393 comes in two variants, the 2-cabin and then the 3-cabin. Usually the 2-cabin is the one that you want, and this one happens to be a 3. So instead of a big fancy master bedroom in the back of the boat, this boat gives you split twins that are fairly difficult for adults to actually enjoy sleeping in. So you'll probably be sleeping in the Pullman up front, which is okay, but whoever gets into bed here first will have to climb over the other person to go pee. So whoever pees more will have to sleep on the outside. Not the end of the world, because the Pullman does give you something really cool. It gives you that massive head up in the front to do all that peeing. These Pullman berth boats are honestly great for privacy. Sleeping up in the front with the door closed and you have your own bathroom, it's super nice if other people are on the boat too. But therein lies the problem. What if you're just a couple? No other people, no kids, no guests. What's the point of all this privacy? Most people would have much rather had the massive single aft cabin master suite that makes the 393 more desirable, which kind of makes this one a little less desirable. Before we dive into this fresh back from paradise boat that's already been outfitted, what are these boats actually worth? I like to use Yacht World to determine the value because listing a boat on Yacht World costs money. So any old listings tend to be taken down pretty quickly. We won't see a boat here that sold 6 months ago. Our boat is listed for top dollar in this bracket, 129 grand. But there's another one in Miami for 69 grand. And it looks great. It's a few years older, but it has a whole new electronics package. The interior looks really nice, other than the cushion upholstery being made out of old high school gym mat material. The listing on this boat explains why it's so cheap. The engine was rebuilt, but now it has an oil leak. The solar is not operable. The bottom is due for paint, and the windows leak. So it's a really nice boat, but a good example of a bottom dollar example of the 393 because it needs some pretty significant work. Not end of the world stuff, but pretty significant nonetheless. The listings go on, and these boats seem to range at right around $100,000 average. So our boat at almost $130 is in the top tier of pricing for these boats, so it had better be a top tier example then, right? Something else about this boat, and all sailboats really, financing and depreciation. The 393s are just turning 20 years old now, which is one of the biggest depreciation points for sailboats for sort of three different reasons. First, most lenders won't finance a boat older than 20 years, so getting a loan for this 130 grand to buy this boat might be a struggle. This particular one is a 2006, so it isn't there yet, but to keep its top dollar asking price, it better not age at all because it's very close to that line. If you buy it and keep it for 3 years, it'll be 20, and then it'll kind of be worth less. The second issue is insurance. Boat US or Geico is the hardest insurer to work with, and it won't be easy to insure a boat older than 20 years. And third, as the boat approaches 20 years old, it's just becoming due for new rigging and new sails. An ocean-going rig usually starts showing rust at around this age, and good Dacron sails are usually around end of life, at about the 15 or 20 year mark too. This boat has another caveat too. The listing explains that the boat did drag at anchor under the previous owner's ownership, and it got damaged, but repairs were made professionally, and while we can't tell in the pictures, at least they're being honest about it. However, what will our insurance company think of that if we call them to get insurance on this boat? Another reason we like these Beneteaus is we get a good Yanmar with them. This one is a 4J model with about 3,000 hours on it, so provided it was cared for, even reasonably, it should have at least a decade of good service left in it. We can check the good engine we want off the list with these boats. So let's have a look at this actual boat. And remember, it's usually my job to be hypercritical of boats like this. People pay me to sort of ruin a boat for them if it can be ruined. Before we look though, the mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily. I couldn't do this stuff without you guys and the help of the patrons who give a couple of bucks an episode to make this all possible. A big shout out to all the existing patrons who helped me do this. If you'd like to help out, please consider becoming a patron. Now let's meet Zola. These pictures were obviously taken by a drone in what looks like the Bahamas. And right off the hop, they have two massive solar panels mounted sideways over the transom. These are big new generation panels, and the listing says they have over 1,100 watts here. And I believe it. The decision to mount them sideways, though, is interesting. Well, it doesn't matter at sea. I've been through locks, and I've tied up in some tight fuel docks, and I have to worry about these panels hitting off of something. They are the widest part of the boat, and sailboats being effectively rear wheel steering, as you approach an obstacle, the stern is usually what hits first. Is this a deal breaker for me? Well, in the Erie Canal or anywhere else with locks, more than about 6 feet tall, yes, you really wouldn't be able to lock this boat safely, but it's already down south, so that wouldn't really be a problem. Also in this picture, we can note the dinghy that it comes with. It looks like at least a 10-foot rib, and that's awesome. But I do wonder why the engine cover's off in the picture. Seems like she might be struggling with that motor. Outboards can be replaced anyway. As we get on board here, we can see this new B&G display that they talk about in the ad that's been installed, and all the Ray Marine displays all around it. But alas, what's this? An iPad mount. I always say it's funny how many people spend big money on a super fancy chart plotter just to end up using an iPad anyway. Chart plotter technology is borrowed from the aviation industry, and none of the companies that make these things have figured out how to make a touchscreen that's easy to use. Most folks prefer the best touchscreen on the market, a tablet. And for $80 a year for a Navionics subscription, it kind of makes a big fancy chart plotter seem a bit silly. Now these cockpits on these boats are roomy enough to relax with benches long enough to lay down on, which is super nice, but I don't see any cushions. We're going to want some of those. I do also like to see these winch covers. I bet these folks got a sewing machine and that was probably one of their first projects when they got it. I like to see that all these lines are neat and tidy as well. It's a good look when the seller takes care of things like that. Headed inside, we don't find any high school gym mat material here. It's nice white cushions. This is what sells boats, pictures like this. Except for the portable fridge in the middle of the floor. What's the deal here? Does the factory fridge not work? Is it not cold enough? Please explain, because the ad doesn't mention this at all. Also note that that portable fridge is running off AC power, not DC. I need some answers here. And the big fan. Why the big fan? That's an AC powered fan. Does the boat smell bad? Is there a lot of moisture we're trying to get rid of? I have questions. The 393 is one of the Beneteaus that runs the galley lengthwise down the side. And while that makes it part of the room and part of the conversation and very spacious, it is basically impossible to use it at sea. Imagine standing at that counter on a 25-degree heel, bashing over waves, trying to cook while you fall over. Not a good look, but at anchor, this galley is the one you want. Every boat is a compromise. We also get a nice nav desk here, but again, no cushion. This looks like it would be a good place to work from a laptop or something if we get ourselves a cushion, because this actually has a backrest, so I could see sitting here and working all day if I had to. But what's this? Another fan. These people must be famous. We get a nice saloon shot here with the giant TV on the wall. I like it. And I see an AC vent in the back here, but the ad doesn't mention air conditioning. Is it broken like the fridge? What's going on here? And alas, we come to the split aft cabins we were talking about. We get a picture here of the starboard side cabin, which, as you can see, is not a great place for grown-ups to sleep, but it would be a pretty good spot to put the kids or maybe a guest. And as people do, one of the aft cabins becomes your garage that you fill with all of your junk that doesn't have a home otherwise. And we actually don't get a picture in this ad of the portside aft cabin, so we can just assume that it's their garage and it's full of stuff, maybe more of their fans. Someone climbed into the bed here and shut the door for this shot, and it makes me kind of claustrophobic. Let's get out of here. The Pullman. This is up front, and I really do love these. You get this totally private bedroom that, with the door closed, feels somehow so far from being part of the boat. I can't really explain it very well, but being up here with the door closed gets you this sort of hotel room disconnected outside feeling, like you aren't even on a boat anymore. It's really nice. This picture kind of irritates me though on the wall. Go into the world and do well, but more importantly, go into the world and do good. I don't know. Is it just me? Was this from a yard sale? Also, there's no fans up here. The nitty-gritty of upgrades to this boat. From that slightly more than you should ever need 1100 and something plus watts of solar, we feed these 6 AGM batteries that are not very old. This is 600 amp hours of power total, but because they're AGM, we're going to use about 450 amp hours of that. To put that in perspective, my boat uses about 180 amp hours every day on full draw, fridge, freezer, everything. So having 450 would really get me through nicely for a few days without any charging at all. This is a lot of battery. Wiring looks great too, but I'm not entirely sure what's holding these things in place. And also, by ABYC code, they should be in a box. I don't see any containment box here, so the survey may highlight that, and your insurance company may insist on that being fixed. As we said before, we get this Yanmar with this boat, which is always my first choice in engine. Yanmar is internationally easy to get parts for, easy to find mechanics that know how to work on them and fix them. And this one looks really clean, and it has its own dedicated start battery, which, again, seems to be lacking a containment box. Now, I prefer Yanmar over anything else, but I like Volvo too. Just old Westerbeeks and Universals scare me from personal experience, and a diesel can be hard to size up from the outside. You can ask your surveyor, though, about oil sample analysis or compression testing if you think the engine is questionable. This one has about 3,000 hours on it, and it looks clean, so provided it doesn't blow black smoke everywhere like a lifted Dodge Ram at a high school, it should be fine. I like this boat. I like the 393 in general. If you had to just Google a picture of a modern cruising sailboat to explain it to somebody, the 393 is basically what you'd show them. It's small enough that you can single-hand it. It's wide enough that it can be comfortable inside. And it's heavy enough that if we really wanted to stick it to the Caribbean and sail across to Bermuda and then to the Med, we could do that in relative safety and comfort. My beef with this boat is very limited. You have to be okay with it being the 3-cabin model and climbing over someone to pee. You have to be okay with it not being able to cook safely at sea because of that long galley. You have to get some honest answers about what's going on with the fridge, the AC, and the fans everywhere. You have to wonder why the listing is kind of crappy. And you have to reason with this. What they have here is a proven Caribbean boat that is known to sail well. It's been kitted out with basically exactly the amount of solar and battery that you'll be needing. It seems to be in relatively good shape. And it's being offered in Florida, just at the right time to go cruising, for the maximum dollar amount that you could possibly ask for a 393. Is this the maximum 393 on the market? Condition-wise, likely not. There are nicer boats out there, but it'll save you about 10 grand on solar and batteries and anchor and chain. So should you buy this one, or just buy a cheaper one that's a bit nicer and kit it out yourself? That's up to you. If you're boat shopping right now and you want to book an hour of my time, head on over to ladyksailingcom/consults. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if it helped you, and subscribe if you haven't. Until next week, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. We'll see ya.